Every man wanted her because of her stunning beauty. But one night with the billionaire CEO made everything new, and he made everyone feel welcome and sincere greetings to everyone who is joining us today. My name is Storyteller James, and I am beyond thrilled to have you with me today because the story is truly special, brimming with passion, love, and a deep romance that will captivate you. Heart from beginning to end, and I can assure you that you won't want to miss a single, I promise. You'll enjoy every twist and turn as we embark on this beautiful journey if you listen to this journey all the way to the end. Together, I'd like to send you all some lovely prayers for your love. You will always be surrounded by happiness and joy, and may peace fill your heart. And comfort as we tell this love story. Before moving on to the story I'd love, please let me know where you're watching from by leaving a comment below. Always interested in learning where our viewers are tuning in, so make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Button so that you never miss a new story. Now let's dive right into the story of today and let your imagination soar. Enjoy the story. A phenomenon, Aretha Franklin was more than just a beautiful woman, living enchantress whose presence seemed to change the atmosphere as she walked with grace. Movements as fluid as poetry, her smooth brown skin glowing beneath the city lights that exuded elegance and captivated all who saw them. She had an allure that was so potent that it almost made her dangerous, drew men toward her like moths to a flame, attracting admiration and obsession from them. Flame, but she remained untouchable. She was a mystery wrapped in class, and her striking face was framed by her stylishly braided hair, giving her self-assurance. The perfection of her expressive, wide eyes which appeared to contain untold tales, dreams and a passion that only a select few could truly comprehend. Her full lips, and since Aretha was not a woman, men never dared indulge in her natural allure, which was inviting. Who easily won? Her perfectly arched and shaped eyebrows added to her beauty almost commands her presence with her sharp gaze. When she entered a room, conversations paused, heads turned, and she was intoxicating. Men's hearts raced as they longed for her, each hoping to make SM smile, a glance, or even a brief moment of her attention. But Aretha chose Ive. She was aware of her worth and the power she possessed, and she refused to be reduced to a mere conquest. Men's attempts to position themselves, longing glances, and whispered admiration closer to her whenever she was around them. But none of them ever piqued her interest enough to carefully break her built walls. She was independent, ambitious, and had dreams for the future. Simple romance, a person who refused to be defined by men's affections. But even though she was determined, fate had other ideas. One man was going to challenge her beliefs and shake up the unwavering self-assurance that caused her to experience emotions she had never been able to experience before meeting Mitchell Sneer. A billionaire CEO was unlike any other man she had ever met. Man of immense power, wealth, and influence. But his presence stood out more than his status. The unwavering confidence in his stride and the way that his keen eye appeared to see beyond the surface, into the very souls of those who dared to look at him. In contrast to the men who followed her like lost people hoping for salvation, Mitchell didn't chase, he didn't look at fawn, and he didn't try to impress. He observed with precision and exuded an energy of dominance and control. He was the kind of man who didn't have to, with a quiet but undeniable intensity, and declare his power. The moment he entered a room Aretha noticed for, he felt his power. He intrigued her for the first time, something other than the usual dismissal she gave to admirers. Not due to his wealth or status, but rather due to the fact that he appeared unconcerned by her allure, unaffected by the enchantment he was a challenge. Enslaved like so many others before him, an enigma was a natural force. That silently called for attention, and more than anything else made him dangerous. Aretha had always been in charge, set the rules for her interactions. But Mitchell's very presence posed a threat to redress that equilibrium. Their initial encounter was not one of grand gestures or subtle, unspoken, tension-laden attempts at seduction, were the result of elaborate efforts that neither of them acknowledged but both deeply felt when their eyes met, as if they had a secret understanding, a silent dare, a test of wills, Mitchell did not stare at her with the fervor of a bewitched man. He looked at her as if he saw something greater than herself, something he wanted to discover. At that first moment when everything changed, Artha felt both curiosity and danger. Curiosity that made her wonder what it would be like to let her guard down and experience that she was unaware at the time that this was the beginning of something that would alter the path this man represented. She was unaware that this man was the one who did for the rest of her life. She never imagined Chase would win her heart in such unexpected ways. Possible, and the night air carried the weight of unspoken as the New Jersey city lights shimmered around them. Possibilities. Mitchell Sneer and Aretha Franklin stood at the brink of a story that would defy expectations. A story that was just beginning to challenge limits and ignite a passion that neither of them could overcome. One evening, Artha was in Manhattan's heart, attending a well-known gala that promised glitz. She was dressed to impress and a group of the city's most influential people. In a stunning crimson gown that embraced her curves with the right amount of class and sensuality in the fabric, glowed like gold on her smooth brown skin as it shone in the bright light. The dress's cut showed off her flawless figure and braided hair. Her eyes were perfectly framed by her as it cascaded down her back like a masterpiece. As she entered the room, her sculpted eyebrows had an undeniable allure. The entire room seemed to stop talking, and everyone's eyes were on her. Men were captivated, but they were unable to speak, as if her presence had altered the air itself. They tried to turn their attention away, but none of them dared to get close to her. Instead, they watched from afar, unsure of how to end the. She had carefully constructed an invisible barrier around herself over the years to protect herself from the. Aretha had long gotten used to the constant attention she received. Kind of admiration that she had learned to ignore because she was used to being the center of attention. She kept her distance because she realized how fleeting their interest was. She didn't want to be just another thing that people wanted to admire from afar, wanted something more genuine. But then it seemed like fate had other ideas for her. Standing tall at the bar, sipping a glass of, my gaze crossed with someone else's across the room. Mitchell Sneer, a man who exuded self-assurance and an air of confidence, had whiskey in his hand. Mystery that piqued her interest, and he was handsome in a way that relied on an aura rather than just charm or appearance. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and the beard he wore only added to his quiet strength, which caught people's attention. To his rugged appearance, giving him an air of experience and sophistication. Aretha was a legend and the subject of numerous conversations, tales, and Mitchell had heard of her. In the high society circles of New Jersey and beyond, there were fantasies, but as he watched her from across the room, he realized that the woman in front of him was more than just a woman. She was even more stunning in person than the rumors or descriptions, striking in a way that was unlike any other, and made him temporarily unable to speak. Mitchell didn't approach her with the eagerness of someone who was captivated by her mere presence, wished to win her love instead. But Artha had a quality that inspired him to comprehend her, because of something about her poise, her self-assurance, and the mystery she carried with her. That drew him's eyes met for a split second, and in that split second, an unspoken. They felt a connection that was subtle but undeniable, like an electric current that neither of them could ignore. Mitchell purposefully crossed the room in the direction of AC. His precise and measured steps came to an abrupt halt when he was only a few feet away. He locked eyes with Artha with a steady gaze and a small, confident smile. He said, his voice smooth, Aretha Franklin, playing in the corners of his lips, and composed with a strength that made it impossible for anyone not to listen. I was beginning to believe you were a myth. Artha raised an eyebrow in response, impressed by his calm demeanor. She was accustomed to men addressing her, so her lips curled into a knowing smirk. They spoke casually and without pretense or exaggeration, which was refreshing and a stark contrast to the usual, despite the flattery or desperation she received. She responded coolly. Despite his playful tone, his calm demeanor piqued her curiosity, so she studied him for a longer period of time, taking in his presence, his sharp features, and he exuded charm, and neither his posture nor his approach suggested nervousness or awkwardness. Only a confident silence, the kind that stood out without ever needing to demand it, as opposed to the other men, who had always tried to impress her with empty words or compliments. Didn't use the usual strategies to win her over. He didn't woo her or try to make her feel like an object of. Instead, he spoke to her with intelligence, using measured language and deliberate, revealing a sharp wit and an undercurrent fervor that made Artha feel something she rarely did. She had always been the one in charge and the one who established the rules. But with Mitchell, things felt different because of his magnetic presence, but not because domineering. He didn't come to intimidate her with his charm or wealth. Rather, he appeared to understand the significance of quiet perseverance and the slow burn of genuine connection as they were locked in this brief but charged exchange. Artha, as they stood there, felt a shift in her, a crack in the wall she'd worked so hard to build around herself. Her heart, she felt her curiosity rise, and for the first time in a long time. She wanted to learn more about him, not because of an emotion that had been hidden beneath layers of indifference, status, but rather because there was something genuine about him that distinguished him from the others. Mitchell smiled. He spoke with a calmness that seemed almost effortless and never wavered. I have to admit that he kept speaking low and inviting, and I've always wondered what imagined meeting the woman who has managed to keep everyone in this room's attention while also remaining, his words, untouchable, floated in the air between them. Intense. That was felt deep beneath the surface of Aretha's, even though it wasn't immediately apparent. She smiled for the first time that evening, lips parted, intrigued. A glimmer of excitement in her eyes that this wasn't just a chance meeting. This marked the beginning of something else, which neither of them could yet fully comprehend as the night progressed. Aretha couldn't stop the music, laughter, and glasses clinking that continued around them, believing that this was just the beginning of an unanticipated journey that would take her far from the world that was expected of her. She had so meticulously constructed and entered a realm of fascination, passion, and possibly something else. The challenge Mitchell had not said lingered in her mind. And for the first time, Artha discovered that her attraction to someone was not based on their desire or admiration, but they exuded the quiet strength of their depth and the mystery of their surroundings. As the evening progressed, Aretha couldn't help but wonder if this man would finally break through the high barriers she had erected around her heart, or he fades into the background of her life, just like the others before him. In a sea of countless encounters, a fleeting moment that would only be known through time. One thing was certain. Mitchell Sandner was different from the other men in Adra. Franklin was not one to back down from a challenge, and Artha was used to being the target of the woman who attracted men's attention at every occasion was the man's desire, fawned over her and tried to talk to her to be in her presence, but she was appreciative because no one had ever really caught her attention before. Additionally, despite her appreciation for the compliment, she had long become dissatisfied with the recurring patterns of admiration, and her beauty had become a double-edged sword for Drew, which had resulted in empty praise. Attention, while at the same time erecting barriers around her heart, Mitchell Sandner stood out from the crowd. When they first looked at each other, Artha knew he wasn't like the others, beg for her time, or pursue her like so many men before him. He never moved quickly. Instead of trying to impress or elevate her, he gave her space and never pushed, making it impossible for her to forget him, but never overly trying, was a subtle art that Mitchell had perfected. His self-assurance was not overbearing or boastful, but it was apparent in it seemed as though the air moved around him with each step he took into a room, and even though he didn't always want attention, it always found him. Mitchell's manner of speaking most intrigued Artha. She had never been in a situation where she felt compelled to pursue a man, but over the course of the following few days, they once more crossed paths, and again at private gatherings and elite events, as well as social gatherings, whenever their conversations occurred. Their conversations got longer and more heated, but Mitchell never pushed her, was patient, and always cool and collected. But even after they parted ways, his presence remained in her thoughts. He spoke rather than made grand gestures or empty promises to impress her. There was no pressure, just wit and ease that felt organic rather than forced. She had no urge to hurry, but every moment she spent with him made her want more it was the first time that Arya felt like she was being pursued. And it was a strange and unsettling sensation, been the one who was pursued and in charge of the game. But Mitchell set the rules, had changed, which was thrilling but unsettling in a way she hadn't experienced before. It was anticipated that she would dislike the vulnerability it brought, the sense of losing oneself in another, but was undeniable that it enthralled her, and she found herself thinking about him even when she didn't want to think about the Mitchell Sandner was the quiet, confident man. What did he really want? These thoughts flew out of her like a whirlwind, and no matter how hard she tried to push them away. But they always came back to him, which he could do. Her curiosity of asking her about her own desires. Mitchell, on the other hand, he enjoyed observing her growing curiosity, which he could see in her eyes, stayed with him a little longer than was necessary, and the way her smile lingered, it was game one. He was determined to win, but unlike the other games he had played, this one demanded patience, which he did not value. Just one brief night of passion with Atha. He desired her heart more than anything else. Her love and trust, which he was aware could not be won by hurrying or pushing. It would take some time, but Mitchell had always been a man who appreciated. He had developed his empire of peace through patience, knowing that things in life take time and effort, so he played his game with Artha. He gave her space carefully without constantly paying attention to her, but he didn't let her forget about him either, so he didn't have to chase her because he knew she would eventually approach him on her own terms. And when she did, she eventually made the decision he would be there, ready to claim her, not just as a lover if she let her guard down. However, as a partner in every sense of the word, he wanted her for more than just her beauty or charm. Who she was, the real woman, the one who had never been vulnerable with anyone. He wanted to be the one who shattered the barriers she had so carefully built around herself. The one who could demonstrate to her that despite her strength, she could let someone in without losing her identity. Herself in the process, and the more he thought about her, the more determined he became to keep her from getting away. Away without fighting, and the more he practiced his patience, the more certain he became that he would ultimately win. Arthur Franklin stood out from the crowd. Woman he had ever met, and he was aware that he wouldn't be able to win her over with extravagant gestures or empty assurances, understanding by allowing her to approach him when she was ready, and most of all the while demonstrating to her that he was the only person who could truly care about her. Mitchell was already able to overcome the challenges, flaws included, that had just begun. He wouldn't rush it, but he would let her come to him when she could see the first cracks in the walls she had built around herself. In her own time, but he would be prepared when she did, so he let the game go. Spread out in the knowledge that Aretha's interest would increase with each passing day, and Mitchell Snur, on the other hand, wasn't up to the challenge because of her desire. After weeks of flirtatious exchanges and a palpable chemistry, he is about to let it be SLI. Mitchell finally decided that it was time to act, and neither could ignore, had carefully devised a strategy to satisfy Aretha's longing for something more substantial. Something that went beyond. He knew that despite her beauty and the incessant compliments of men who wanted her, he had to win her over, would need to provide something that no one else had, such as genuine vulnerability, a connection, and the opportunity to discover a side of herself she had long suppressed. He sent her a one-evening, handwritten invitation to a private dinner on his rooftop with a view of the stunning New York skyline. The gesture was thoughtful and personal, and it said more than any flashy gesture or elaborate text could intrigue Ariadne, who had always, when it came to her feelings, she had always been cautious. But there was something about Mitchell. She accepted the invitation because it piqued her curiosity and made her want to get out of her comfort zone, mind racing with possibilities and questions. What did Mitchell intend to accomplish in this private setting as she? When they got there, a warm atmosphere was created by the candlelight against the night sky. Immediately put her at ease, and the rooftop was transformed into a tranquil, intimate space with delicate white roses were all over the table, and the table was set with fine china and soft music, playing in the background, creating a mood that appeared to encourage connection with the new. Although the York skyline could be seen in the distance, it seemed as though the outside world had vanished, leaving Allure. Mitchell was already there, just the two of them in a quiet bubble, waiting for her, dressed dread impeccably and calmly as always. She couldn't help but notice how effortlessly he carried himself there, as he smiled with confidence at her. Was himself without pretense or show. That authenticity was rare, something she hadn't realized she was missing up until this point, and he helped her to the table. Settling into her seat, he gave each of them a deep red wine glass. She hesitated, catching the light in a way that almost seemed magical. She spoke softly as she looked around the grand setting, her words hinting at, she wasn't used to revealing, I don't do this often because of her vulnerability. Acknowledged, her eyes meeting his, her voice being softer than usual, showing her sincerity. Mitchell noticed the tone. As he looked at her, his eyes were filled with admiration. And having comprehended, let's make it unforgettable, he replied with a playful smirk, his voice smooth, calm, and full of promise. It appeared as though he was aware of the significance of the moment and the breadth of the connection they were about to forge, was in a state of stillness and didn't rush or push for anything. Quiet confidence that informed her that this was not just an attempt to claim her or seduce her. Something else happened as they ate, and the conversation naturally got deeper into the previous layers. Carefully constructed around Artha, began to peel away over time, and for first time she talked about things she had been keeping to herself for so long. They talked about their dreams, fears, and the feeling of isolation that accompanied their lives. In particular, opened up in a way she hadn't anticipated. She had always been around admirers, by many desired by many more, but she has never truly known in her world because only people saw. Mitchell appeared to see beyond her superficial beauty. He was more interested in the real Aretha than in the woman who represented perfection or conquest. They talked about Franklin, the woman who had thoughts, dreams, and fears, and how, despite their wealth and success, they experienced a deep sense of isolation despite being surrounded by advertisers frequently. Left them feeling alone and misunderstood, and Artha was drawn to her. She could tell there was more to Mitchell's openness and willingness to discuss topics that the majority of people avoided. To him, the self-assured CEO, whose success and power everyone admired, was a man who had also been shaped by his experiences and longed for something real despite everything. Aretha realized as the night progressed that he wasn't the ubiquitous billionaire tycoon. Admiration, but as a man who was just as prone to vulnerability as she was, someone who had learned to protect himself by hiding behind walls when she was struck by the sincerity in his words, including the fact that he did not attempt to awe her with grandiose statements or declarations of love in which he simply discussed his thoughts, anxieties, and experiences in a manner that gave her a sense of security. For the first time, she felt like someone truly understood her, rather than just the version of her that was admired for her beauty. But the real her was as if Mitchell had seen her as she really was by reaching down into her soul. Was the city lights which were twinkling in the distance as the evening progressed? The conversation became more intimate rather than casual. They told stories, cracked a few jokes, and let the evening continue in comfortable silence. With each spoken word and glance exchanged, the connection between the two became stronger. Aretha realized that this night had been a failure when the dinner finally came to an end, and the last glass of wine was served. Unlike any other, it wasn't about the extravagant setting or the opulence. The dinner had been about something much more significant, an emotional connection that had developed. She had naturally entered the evening guarded and uncertain, without force or pretense, of what to anticipate from ECT, but by the end, she wanted more time with Mitchell to see where this connection may result in Mitchell experiencing the same shift that he had always been drawn to. Aretha's beauty, but this evening he had seen the real her, the living woman, hidden her true self from the outside world, and for the purposes of, as he walked her to, it was the first time he felt like he was seeing the woman he had always hoped existed beneath the surface. He gently opened the door and took her hand in his. Artha, he said softly, sincere voice. I'm not interested in playing because this was just the beginning. Games, I'm willing to take my time because I want to really get to know you. If it means earning your trust, his words were straightforward, but they carried a weight of genuineness that he wasn't just another man trying to win, unlike anything she had ever experienced. He didn't try to get her attention or impress her with meaningless compliments, nor did he try to make her, instead of feeling like an object to be possessed. His quiet confidence and his capacity to speak to. He listened to her not only as a person of substance, but also as a beautiful woman. Truly listened to her talk about her goals, challenges, and deepest worries. He spoke honestly and without pretense, with an open heart, and in that very instant, Aretha did something she had never done before. She let go of her guard. Mitchell wasn't like that. She let him see a little of her true self. The other people, who only saw the outside, he took the time to get to know her and see. He inquired beyond her stunning beauty, which had won the admiration of every man who had met her. Not to impress, but to connect with her, he wanted to know her passions, dreams, and fears, and he desired to share his own with Artha, who was captivated by his sincerity, was demonstrated by the fact that he did not rush her or pressurize her into speaking. Allowed her to be who she was, and she felt safe for the first time in a long time. Aretha found herself thinking more and more about Mitchell than she had ever before as their relationship grew over the course of the days. Had a man who didn't try to take her for himself or win her over with his wealth or charm Mitchell didn't have to flaunt his success or power? He already possessed a level of power that was independent of wealth or status. Was the manner in which he carried himself the way he made her feel valued and heard? Valued his presence in her life as a welcome change of pace. And the first Martha was more than just a woman to admire from afar. She was a person. During one of, he truly cared about a person he wanted to know about. Their late-night conversations in the vast sky filled with stars that A-shift occurred within Artha, who had always taken pride in being in control of her emotions. But with Mitchell, things were different. She didn't think she had to defend herself against him. Rather, there was a gaining faith and a mute acceptance of the possibility that maybe, just maybe, under the gentle glow of, she could love herself and be loved in return. The moonlight as they ate a private dinner on his rooftop with a view of New York City's glittering lights. With a firmness to his touch, Mitchell reached out to grab her hand. It caused her to feel a wave of warmth as their fingers became entwined. Looked into her eyes, his low, sincere voice. Artha, I don't just want a night with you. I want a lifetime those, he said softly, his words floating in the air between them. Artha was struck like a lightning bolt by the simple but profound words. She had heard declarations of love before, but none of them had, have you ever felt so real and genuine? His voice was devoid of flattery and pretension, pure candor, and at that exact instant, Aretha felt something stir inside of her, something that she had buried so deeply for so long. Could it be that she had finally found someone who didn't just see her for what she looked like? If it weren't for her heart, her breath caught in her throat, not her status or appearance. And for a brief moment, she was unable to speak because her heart raced with both excitement and she felt this real fear. Could she now finally allow herself to consider the possibility that true love was not just a fairy tale? She looked at Mitchell, his eyes scanning hers for any that she could feel. Sign of doubt, but all she saw was genuine affection and warmth. Putting an end to any fears she still had, the walls she had built for so long began to fall apart piece by piece. As she looked into his eyes and Artha gave her permission for the first time in a long time. Herself to envision a future other than as a stunning woman who is adored by the world. However, as a woman who was adored by a man who truly appreciated her for who she was, her voice was, she replied, I want that too, Mitchell. A lifetime with you, barely whispering. Aura realized then and there that the night had forever altered her life, had its own rhythm, and the stars above were illuminating the city in a silvery glow, as if nature itself worked together to make this moment, the moment when two souls collided in, perfect, an outburst of intense desire and emotion, where a woman who had always admired, desired, and even worshipped, would finally consent to being physically touched but emotionally in a way that no man had before. And the man who had relied on discipline, control, and strategy to build his empire would find himself falling apart, crumbling under the weight of a passion he'd never entered, anticipated, or imagined could happen. And nonetheless, he was standing in front of the most mesmerizing woman he had ever seen, a woman who had killed him. A single glance, a single touch, and a single whisper set fire to his soul and fire, of her breath touching his skin and making him feel things he had long hidden behind layers of powerlessness and indifference. As he led her across the opulent balcony overlooking the sparkling New York skyline with his hand, he felt an unfathomable surge that goes beyond simple lust and is more profound than mere attraction, dangerously close to obsession. Yet beautiful and intoxicating with her body was alive with a thrill she had never experienced before, and she felt as though she were giving into a force. A force greater than her own pulled her in different directions toward Mitchell. That defied logic, reason, and every wall she had ever constructed around her heart, because this man is so irresistibly and dangerously charming. The intense man was not just another admirer, suitor, or desperate fool. He was different, enchanted by her beauty. He was the storm she hadn't anticipated, the fire she hadn't realized she was prepared to burn in, and their bodies moved in a synchronized manner as they danced under the stars. The murmurs and slow hypnotic rhythm of the world around them faded, a la the music. Of other guests vanished completely, leaving only them locked in his hands were resting on the curve of the engaging in a whispered touch, gaze, and breath conversation. Her waist, her fingers lightly trailing over his chest, in the simmering, ready heat between them. To erupt, and when he finally leaned in, his lips were just above hers, hovering just above hers. The way he paused, as if waiting for her, was like warm breath teasing a silent question. To back off, to stop him, but she didn't and couldn't because she couldn't. Being screamed for, wanting, and when they finally spoke, it was electric, a powerful jolt that took her breath and sent her to her knees. She clung to him in a weak way as he intensified his kiss on her lips. She responded with the same fervor and a hunger that made her head spin, her body pressing against his as the kiss turned, her hands tangled in his hair. From casual investigation to a pressing need for an unspoken declaration that they were unwilling to leave this at any time, not tonight, and Mitchell carried her inside with grace and determination, lifting her into his arms without interrupting the kiss. That made her feel uneasy, and as they moved through the grand penthouse, the soft light of the candles that were flickering in golden shadows covered their entwined bodies in the dimly lit room. She realized that this was unlike anything else she had ever experienced. It wasn't just another night or a single moment of passion, but this was something entirely different, something more substantial, terrifying in its intensity. But she was unwilling to resist or fight it. Because for the first time in her life, she didn't just feel wanted because she was pretty. Not only for the fantasy she represented, but also for the woman beneath Mitchell's perfection as something real. He laid her down on the soft silk sheets that were hovering above her, and as his gaze melted into hers, he realized that he was lost, completely and utterly engrossed in her, in this woman who had entered his life and turned his entire world upside down in this enchantress, who made him forget everything, control, logic, and everything else. That was not her, and he kissed her along her jawline and down her curve as if it were her. Next she bent under him, her fingers firmly securing his shoulders and her body trembling with anticipation. He waited patiently to enjoy each and every sigh, every hushed plea that came out of her mouth, keeping a mental record of how she responded to his touch as if he were mapping her soul. He found the very essence of who she was, and he returned the favor. For the first time in her life, let go and be vulnerable, allowing a man to see her as she truly is, rather than as a prize to be won or an untouchable goddess. One, however, as a woman and a woman, and when they gave in to their passion, had been simmering between them for weeks. It was a connection between souls as well as bodies, so intense enough to make them both gasp for air and utterly speechless. And as the night wore on, as they lay, tangled, they were breathing together, their hearts beating in unison. Following that, Mitchell held on to her more tightly, as if fearing that she would vanish. If he needed to reassure himself that she was real and Artha, she was, she felt something new as she rested her head against his chest and listened to the steady beat of his heart. She had spent years trying to avoid something dangerous entering her own heart, close to love, and she wasn't afraid for the first time in her life. Running because this night, this man, had rewritten and changed everything. She was safe in his arms as she fell asleep because the rules had broken down the barriers she had so carefully built. One thing was certain, she would never be able to return to her previous self because she now belonged to him. And the moment the news got out, he, whether he knew it or not, also belonged to her, broke the world into chaos and an explosive storm of doubt. Social media is rife with speculation, enmity, and curiosity. High news outlets and social circles with Artha Franklin's name as the most prominent headlines, screens with her face, her presence deconstructed in hushed conversations that take place at elite gatherings, but also in the midst of the whirlwind of utterances and the unrelenting hunger of the helpless one, certainty persisted. She was no longer the untouchable goddess. The woman who remained out of Mitchell Sneer's reach had accomplished the unthinkable. She had conquered what no other man had. The elite men of Manhattan once dared to claim, and now everyone was watching them. Confident in their own appeal, the stunned and perplexed now wonder how this mysterious and effortlessly powerful man had accomplished what? They were unable to comprehend how he had entered her world with quiet dominance and unwavering calm, winning her heart. Of a woman who had fought off billionaire princes' advances for years and the most desirable men in Hollywood, and the media scrambled for information as while reporters speculated about the extent of. Photographers gathered outside her house in the hope of getting a glimpse. Their relationship, how long they were together, and how big this is, the cacophony of voices did not affect Revelation Artha in any way, demanding an explanation because she was experiencing something so uncommon for the first time in her life, profound that neither Mitchell nor any external force could taint it. Unwavering force of nature stood beside her, shielding her from the elements. Grand decisions, but his presence, his hushed assurance, and his refusal to the sanctuary that they had constructed together was invaded by the outside noise. And yet the outside world continued to react, who were once vying for her attention, but are now forced to swallow their pride and ask their own flaws, and wondered why they had never been sufficient. Whereas women whispered about the sheer intensity of the bond that had been formed between Med and caught between admiration and envy. Aretha and Mitchell were unable to ignore their obvious chemistry because of his appearance, at her as if she were the only woman in the world, as she used to be. The ease with which they now gravitated toward him suggested something greater than mere passion, something unbreakable and still. The internet was ablaze with theories about whether or not the rumor was true. Was she finally in love, or was she just caught in the enticing web of a man unlike any other? Had ever known, but to this day, none of it mattered because the world was still watched, and reporters speculated that she was living The reality became so consuming and intoxicating that strangers' opinions nothing but background noise, and Mitchell remained unaffected as usual. His actions spoke louder than the countless others because he was solely focused on her. Headlines pleading for a response, demonstrating to her that look at every little thing to see that he wasn't just another admirer or man, drawn to her concept, but a person who saw her as she was, who comprehended the isolation that resulted from being desired, but never truly known. And as they moved through the torrent of public obsessiveness and the endless debates about their relationship, as the flurry of admirers turned into doubters who questioned Mitchell's ability to truly a woman who was as unattainable as Artha, they remained unmoved because of those who had never experienced a love so unadulterated and unconditional could not fathom what they had constructed. Consuming to the point of absurdity, and as Artha sat next to Mitchell, her fingers, entwined with his, the city below them a hive of speculation. She smiled because she didn't care about the noise or the expectations for the first time in her life. She didn't her in a world that had always been looking for perfection, because now she was liberated from the burden with Mitchell by her side, his presence grounding her in a way she had never experienced before, of having to always present oneself as untouchable, free from the pressure of being every man's woman wanted. But no one really knew, because she wasn't just Arthur Franklin anymore. She was the elusive queen of high society, the one who had finally discovered something real that went beyond the superficial allure of her beauty and do not have anything to do with admiration or status, but rather with connections. And holding her was Mitchell, the mysterious man who had never needed to be pursued because the world naturally gravitated toward him. Gazed with such ferocity that it sent chills down her spine. His expression was hard to read, but contained something unspoken. A silent promise that no matter what the world said, or how many eyes were looking, remained on them because he was here in hers, and nothing could alter that. They sat in the quiet safety of each other's presence as the night wore on. The city still buzzing with the Aretha allowed herself for the first time as she leant into him in the chaos of their revelation. Time to truly believe that this was real and not a brief love affair doomed to be shattered by the expectations of the world, but something unshakable, something that could not be touched by even the most severe scrutiny. And as Mitchell gave her a kiss on the forehead, as he made lazy circles on the back of her hand, which she recognized. Absolute assurance that this was only the beginning, regardless of the storms awaited them, regardless of the number of doubters, envious, or obsessed with their love, they would endure because the world would eventually be able to observe and react. A relationship with a billionaire was never going to be easy, and Arthur was aware that when she gave in to the depth of her feelings for Mitchell, when she let go of her worries, and when she allowed her world would change in ways she could never have imagined if she fell in love with him, because Mitchell Santner he was more than just a man. He was a man of influence and power. He was the kind of person who could enter a room and get everyone's attention without saying a word. And now that he had chosen her, the entire world refused to turn their attention away from her in a way that no one else had before. Because their love had evolved from a relationship into a spectacle, the world would not allow them to live together peacefully, source of enchantment, envy, and never-ending speculation. No matter where they went, even though they tried to keep it private, there were always cameras flashing, always headlines delving into their every move, whispers following them from the manner in which Mitchell held her hand in public to the manner in which she looked at him when she believed no one was watching. But through everything, from the unrelenting intrusion into their lives to the never-ending scrutiny, Mitchell never wavered in his love for a man like him. Neither did he succumb to the pressure of the outside world. The unadulterated, beautiful connection was never subdued by the sanctuary they had constructed. They shared because, to him, nothing mattered, not even the rumors. The speculation had no bearing on what they had, and every time she had to deal with the pressure of being watched or analyzed as if she were nothing more than a character in a story that too many people wanted their own endings for. Threatened to steal her joy in him, but he was there to keep her grounded. Letting them watch as long as you're nothing is holding her whispering against her skin. Else matters, and in those instances, when his touch was all she could hear, when his voice was the only thing she could hear, untouchable was the real thing they had, and she believed him, and that no amount of cameras, headlines, or envious whispers could overcome their love, which was stronger than the world around them. Away from the way he looked at her, touched her, and made her feel as if she were the only woman who had ever existed, she danced in his penthouse with the sprawling city below them. She felt herself falling even further than before, its lights flickering like distant stars. Deeper felt like she was letting go of the love she had once feared, the love she had thought would only hurt. Because Mitchell was more than just a man who wanted her and wanted to have her as a prize to show off. He was a man who loved her and saw the strength in every part of her. Vulnerability, which she had never been brave enough to express, and instead of turning, he held her closer, as he demonstrated to her rather than allowing the weight of her previous hesitations to drive her away. She had nothing to fear because of every touch, every word, and every moment they spent together. Because whatever was going on between them was not just a passing moment, and he was not going anywhere. Rather than merely a fleeting attraction that is doomed to fade away in the face of public scrutiny, something more substantial, lasting, something that could never be the subject of a scandal, rumor, or ex-lover's jealousy. Destroy, and his warm breath warmed her as he pulled her closer while his hands traced the curve of her waist. Because he had, Temple, she was absolutely certain that she was not his, claimed her for his own reasons, not because the world now associates her name with his. She had chosen him because, despite the inevitable difficulties and risks, she wanted this. She wanted him, even though she was aware that loving him meant always being in the spotlight. The life they were making together, the moments they were keeping secret, laughter from the whispered conversations they had at 3 in the morning, when nobody else was awake and they were the only ones there. Living in a love that seemed too overwhelming and consuming to belong to anyone else, and she realized then that despite the fact that the outside world would never stop watching and speculating, since they had this for as long as they did, Mitchell was correct all along. Nothing else mattered as long as they were together. And as the music grew louder around them, he raised her chin, and she let go and gave her a tender kiss that sent chills down her spine, allowing herself to be consumed, she believed. And in that instant, she knew without a Mitchell snare was not a man who made her doubt something she had never been more certain of in her entire life. Empty assurances, he meant what he said when he promised to cherish Franklin. He demonstrated it with every fiber of his being every day in ways that, in contrast to other men who had Mitchell, was different, because he only wanted to see her beauty for a brief moment of passion. He worshipped her soul as well as her body, and he made sure she never had a doubt about how. From the moment they woke up together, he showed her how much he loved her by gently kissing her shoulder as the sunlight broke through the sheer curtains of their penthouse. "Good morning, my queen," they said, holding up a... He made it clear, with a voice soaked in devotion, that she was not just his priority but also in words as well as deeds. And nothing in the world was more important to him than making her feel like she was his most prized possession. However, it wasn't just the extravagant surprises that stood out. There were numerous private islands where candlelit dinners were held, rooftops, designer gowns accompanied by handwritten notes reading, "For my goddess, because no one else could put on this outfit as well as you do." It wasn't the fleet of he gave her 2 expensive cars, and he flew her to Paris because she had. The desire to see the Eiffel Tower sparkle at night was once mentioned in the... He looked at her as though she were the most precious thing he had ever held in his hands, even the smallest things. Noticed every little thing about her, like how much she enjoyed reading in bed with a cup of tea, and how she bit her lip when he never missed a chance to reassure her that she was loved beyond reason and logic while she was deep in thought. She quickly realized that there was undeniable security in being with him, a safety she had never experienced before. That his love was more than just passion, it was devotion to ensuring. When the outside world tried to destroy her, she never had to face a storm by herself. Women who were envious tried to spread rumors that she was just another beautiful woman who had caught "you are not." Mitchell's eye temporarily shut them down without hesitation. "Temporary," he told her one evening, "you are my forever," holding her close as they stood with the city lights twinkling below on the balcony of their New York penthouse. "Let them talk, my love. Burn in envy because you are mine, and nothing can alter that." And she believed him because he gave her no reason to doubt him every day by running warm baths for her when she was tired, her body easing her stress after a long day by gently massaging it. He skipped meetings to sit next to her, press his fingers through her braids, and listen to her vent. Whispers as he kisses her forehead. "Tell me everything, my love. I'm here when..." She was insecure and wondered if she was good enough for him, so he stopped talking. Tracing his fingers along her skin, he kissed her doubts slowly and lingeringly, reminding her how much she was loved and how irreplaceable she was. When he was alone, he would whisper into Aretha's ear, "And it has only been you, has always been and always will be Mitchell's love." He was more than just a romantic interest. He became her main support system, pushing her toward him. In her dreams, ensuring that she would never have to dim her light for anyone you shouldn't love, he told her one night, holding her close as they lay in bed. Shrink yourself to fit into someone else's expectations. You are meant to shine, he traces with his fingers on her bare shoulder. And I will spend my life proving to you that he supported her goals. Without hesitating, not because he believed she required it, but rather because he wanted to see her grow and develop when she was expressed her desire to open a fashion boutique. In addition to providing financial support, he guided her through each decision. By going to meetings with designers, she made sure she had the best team behind her and celebrated each milestone with the same fervor as if it were his own achievement. Your victories are mine. Triumphs, he told her, about when she got her first major magazine feature, and she knew he meant it because I will always be your biggest fan. No matter despite his busy schedule, he never missed an opportunity to attend to her and make her feel like the most prized woman in the world. His love was not possessive in the world, but it was fiercely protective when at an event, a man crossed a line and spoke to her in a way that made her feel uneasy. Mitchell had him. Immediately escorted out, his jaw clenched, his voice calm but laced with a dangerous edge, and whispered, "No one disrespects my dignity," as he took her in his arms. "Queen, not while I'm breathing," and she knew there was in those moments no safer place on earth than in his arms. He respected her as well as loved her. She felt like the most important person in the universe because she was loved. She had never experienced a love like this before. Not just passion, though their nights together were nothing short of extraordinary. Of euphoric with whispered declarations of love and tracing hands, there was something more substantial, something unbreakable, permeating each other's skin. She felt like she was seen, heard, and understood by him in a way that no one else had, and realized that she had never been truly known, but had been admired all her life. Until the moment he finally got down on one knee to present her, with his voice was thick with emotion, as he said, "Artha, a stunning diamond ring. Franklin, you are the best thing I've ever done for me. Will you marry me?" "Me without hesitation," she whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Cheeks as she repeatedly wrapped her arms around Mitchell, because Mitchell Sneer had done something no other man could. He had not only won her heart, but also demonstrated that she was worth more than just love, that she was worth living forever, and he kissed her. Her securing their future by promising to spend the rest of their lives together, she was certain that she had found a love that was real, that could not be broken, and that she could keep. The yacht gently swayed on the evening was nothing short of magical. The tranquil waters of the Atlantic, with the city lights of New York off in the distance shining like a million diamonds. The sky was a dark shade, casting a mesmerizing glow over the endless waves. Of midnight blue flecked with numerous stars, their soft twinkle shimmering like a celestial masterpiece. The ocean's faintest scent was reflected in the water below the air, crisp and refreshing, complementing the scent of freshly cut roses that adorned the deck. The candles flickered softly in their glass lanterns, casting a golden glow over the scene and contributing to the ethereal atmosphere of melody-blending nighttime instrumental music, played in the background seamlessly with the pulsating waves, creating a romantic symphony that made the moment feel a strange. Artha stood at the boat's aft end, her breathtaking figure silhouetted against the vastness of the night sky, her crimson gown's liquid fire-like drape over her curves, fabric that caught the candle's light and made her look like a god-made vision. The ocean breeze played with her curls, lifting strands and letting them dance around her face, giving her a beauty that was almost poetic. She turned to look at Mitchell, who had been watching her all along, filling his eyes with an intensity that sent chills down her spine. And his charcoal black tuxedo fit him perfectly the way he looked at her, like a glove, exuding the effortless sophistication that only he could possess, in a way she had never experienced before, made her heart race with pure adoration. Mitchell took a deliberate step closer, his heart pounding in anticipation of the night he had planned. Down to the last smallest detail, making sure that everything showed how much he loved her. He approached and reached into his pocket, gracing the velvet box containing a forever symbol. He took a deep breath to prepare himself for the event that would forever alter their lives. Forever, when he was only a few inches from her, he took her hand gently. "Aretha," he whispered softly, his voice soft and reassuring. She turned to face him fully, her enchanting eyes wide against the dark. Her lips parted slightly while she looked at his face, as if she were anticipating something monumental. Mitchell sat down slowly, his sturdy frame humbled by the enormity of his situation, poised to inquire. The world appeared to be still at that point, with the ocean halting its rhythm, the still wind, the stars shining a little bit brighter. He opened the box, revealing the most, as if bearing witness to the love that was about to be sealed forever. A masterpiece of exquisite diamond jewelry, with a radiant cut stone that reflected the stars' brilliance above, encircled by a halo of smaller diamonds that sparkled like they had been infused with the magic of the universe as a whole. But the ring was nothing like the universe. To Mitchell's depth of emotion as he began, his voice remained steady. Filled with emotion, "I knew you were different from the moment I saw you. Are the most beautiful woman I've ever seen, but your strength, your fire, and your kindness go beyond your beauty. And your heart, which has captivated me. You are my confidant, my best friend, and you, my muse and greatest love, have given me my life for a purpose I never imagined. I have discovered a love so profound that it surpasses everything that I was missing with you. Other than that, I can't even fathom going a day without you. Are you Franklin? Will you marry me for the rest of my life?" Ari's lips parted, and her hands flew to her mouth as she wept. A rainbow of emotions washed over her like a tidal wave as her heart swelled with emotion. Sincerity in his voice, vulnerability in his eyes, and pure affection that shone through. From him, it was everything she had ever wanted, and not a single tear fell from her eyes, slipped down her cheek, shining like a drop of liquid silver in the candlelight. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but she could not speak because she had been admired, followed, and worshipped by. She has been loved by numerous men, but never before has she been cherished for who she was instead of. She gave what appeared to be a shaky nod, barely raising her voice above a, when she said yes. Mitchell let out a breath he hadn't taken before. The entire world erupted when she realized he was holding his face and smiling the most radiant smile she had ever seen. The yacht's crew cheered as fireworks illuminated the night sky, dazzling display of color, and the music grew into an exhilarating crescendo. Mitchell Rose slid the cool metal ring onto her delicate finger quickly. She felt a chill run down her spine as it fit perfectly, as if it had been designed just for her, as if their love had always been predestined. He CED her face. He gently wiped the tears from her eyes with both of his thumbs. "I love you, Artha," he whispered more than anything else in the world, his forehead resting against hers. She closed her eyes and savored the steady beat of his heart against hers and the warmth of his touch. "I also love you." Mitchell let out a sigh, but unable to resist for one more second, he grabbed her. Lips in a kiss that was so powerful and in your face that the world around them became a blur. Insignificance. A kiss sealed their fate, promising them eternal love. As the exploding fireworks continued to paint the sky in love language of crimson and gold, Aretha was certain that this was only the beginning. Of the greatest love story ever told, the time had come when the Artha Franklin had no idea what would happen to her. But here she was, standing in front of an elaborate full-length mirror while wearing a stunning, glimmering wedding gown under the soft golden glow of the chandelier. Like a cast of stars, a work of art, the delicate lace trailed down her body, hugging her curves her heart pounded with anticipation as she exuded elegance that made her feel like the queen she had always been destined to be. Took a deep breath and looked in the mirror, barely recognizing the woman. This wasn't just a wedding, was a moment in time when she would enter a new phase of her life. A new chapter in her life, leaving behind the enchantress known as the Untouchables, who every man from New Jersey had desired to be Mitchell Snare's beloved wife, and he accepted the position. Who had claimed her heart completely outside of the grand in a way that no one else could. In the most opulent Hamptons Estates ballroom, guests gathered in sheer anticipation, their muffled whispers filling the air as the string quartet played a gentle, enchanting melody. The setting was like something out of a fairy tale, with rows of ivory roses in gold accents. The scent of the lanterns which lined the aisle, blended with the crisp evening air. The path that Aretha would take as a goddess entering her eternal were lit by softly flickering candles. Destiny, the social elite, had gathered, including Hollywood stars and international tycoons. But none of their Atha cared about people's presence because she only cared about the man who stood at Mitchell, was waiting for her at the altar with unwavering devotion in his eyes. Santner, the billionaire CEO, who, prior to meeting her, had never given in to love, stood in the most exquisitely tailored tuxedo, his chiseled features being softened by, before his piercing gaze, an emotion he had never allowed himself to feel, remained fixed on the entrance, with his hand in a fist, in his heart racing. The audience fell silent in anticipation the moment the grand doors opened. Asartha stepped forward. The crowd let out gasps of admiration. Her beauty was ethereal, and her presence was powerful. Mitchell felt every breath in the room and every step she took down the aisle. The overwhelming realization that this woman was this made his heart tighten and his vision slightly blurred. Every time they met, an incredible, breathtaking woman was about to become his forever, had led to every passionate kiss and whispered love confession. Them up until this very moment, when nothing else mattered, as she. He extended his hand when he got to the altar, and when her fingers met his, it was as if the stars aligned. They would have seen a heartfelt silent conversation, that there were no longer any words needed. The efficient speaker spoke, but Mitchell barely heard him and could only concentrate on the woman in front of him, the one and only person who had ever seen past his. When it came time for their vows, Artha gave the man below wealth and power, shaky breathing, her voice full of emotion. Mitchell, before I met you, I thought love was nothing more than an illusion that passed quickly, something that belonged in love songs, lyrics, and books pages. But you demonstrated to me what love truly entails, and that love is strength. Love is patience. Love cannot be broken. You are my home, my heart, and my forever. Today, I make a promise to be by your side during both times of challenge, to be your best friend, partner, lover, and greatest adventure. Mitchell took the lump in his throat in one swallow, his fingers clenching around it. Hers as he spoke, his voice was steady but full of emotion. Artha, you are he said, woman who before you changed everything for me. I led a life of power, of control over well-thought-out choices. But as soon as you entered my world, you shattered every barrier I had constructed and taught me that love isn't about, I don't believe surrendering to something greater than oneself is the essence of control. I adore you, just love you, and will cherish you for the rest of my life. I will work tirelessly to make you the happiest woman on earth. Promise to keep you safe, treat you with respect, and be there for you through all sunrise. You are my world, and today I make the most significant choice of my life. Be yours forever. Ara's eyes sparkled as she let out a soft, overwhelmed laugh. His words were profound, and he smiled generously, his voice carrying the sacred words that would bind them for all time thanks to my authority. You may then kiss the bride and be pronounced husband and wife. The entire world vanished as Mitchell pressed on her head while gently tilting her face upward. His kiss against hers was so loving and tender that the room seemed to exhale together. Cheers broke out, and the music got louder. But Aura only heard the sound of their hearts beating together. He whispered forever Mrs. Sneer as they were pulled apart, and the celebration of a life began, heralding the beginning of their happily ever after marriage. Every morning, when she awoke to the soft sound of his voice, Mitchell was more to her than she could have ever imagined. Gentle reminder of the love that brought them together. Their bond was unlike anything else she had ever known. Every day, Mitchell continued to adore her in a way that made her feel valued. His devotion remained unwavering, and unwavering was more than just her husband. He was also her partner, her shield, and her ideal friend. Whether it was a private dinner at home where the two of them were enjoying the company of others, or an extravagant trip to a remote island every day, the world outside could be chaotic with its distractions, but being with him was special. And demands, but in their tiny bubble of love, Artha's was perfect. She had everything she ever wanted and more, including the love she shared with Mitchell was founded not only on passion, but also on respect admiration, and an in-depth comprehension of one another were not the kind of love that persisted over time. Rather, Mitchell, with all of his wealth, and grew stronger each day like a flame that got brighter with each passing moment. Power didn't let that define their relationship. He knew that material. Although things were brief, the connection they shared was priceless. He made it a point to remind Artha of that every day with his thoughtful gestures, little surprises, and mannerisms. Always put her first and demonstrated to her that she was the most important person in his life. He frequently stated to her that his success in business was more important than his success in love, which was a truth that contributed to, in their home, Artha feels like the luckiest woman alive. Love was their currency. Spent the most time together, whether it was cooking and spending time together or watching the sun set with him, were moments that were worth more than any luxuries Mitchell could afford. They included life that others coveted, but it wasn't just the endless nights spent in opulent hotels or the grand vacations. Dazzling jewels that caught people's attention were their interactions with one another and Mitchell's appearance. At Aretha as if she were the only woman in the world, treating her as if she were everything to him, just as Artha would do. Smile at him with the same admiration. Her eyes became softer each time they locked eyes. This wasn't just a physical, they were spiritually connected as well, which made them feel like soulmates in every way they were meant to be together, and both of them were aware of it, even in the smallest routine activities like chatting with a friend over a cup of coffee or relaxing they enjoyed each other's company on the couch at night. And Aretha felt as, despite the fact that she had already established herself before Mitchell, she had always been admired for her elegance and beauty. She had longed for a connection that would put her on equal footing with the rest of the world, went beyond the surface, and was a love that didn't depend on how she looked or what she had to offer, unlike the love Mitchell had shown her. Simply the fact that he had recognized her for who she really was and had accepted her unlocked a side of her that she hadn't even known she had. She was more than just a woman of beauty and allure, a solid woman, cherished for who she was inside and as their love. They became a team that faced challenges together as their bond grew. There was no pressure to maintain appearances as people celebrated victories and comforted one another in times of weakness, or live up to anyone else's expectations, but only the happy, peaceful love they had created each time Mitchell held her close and sweetly spoke to her, or simply held her hand. It seemed like time stood still, moments when they would discuss their hopes of starting a family in the future, of getting older together. And every word they said only made their love for one another stronger. Artha couldn't wait for that lay ahead of them, knowing that with Mitchell by her side, they could conquer anything. Their life was a testimony to the kind of love that goes beyond the world's superficialities, because it was based on something real. Regardless of what the rest of the world thought of them, they were something pure and unbreakable. They were content in the quiet areas of their lives, despite any rumors or speculation to the contrary. Aretha was aware that the man she had married as well as their lives were where she had found her forever. Building together. Their love was beautiful because it wasn't perfect, real, and she came to the conclusion that it was sufficient. It was everything that months had since their wedding. Their lives had progressed in the most exquisite ways. The bond between Mitchell and Aretha had only grown closer with each passing day. They had developed into an unbreakable unit, a team that provided support, their love expanding in ways neither could have anticipated, and loved each other so much that every moment they spent together seemed to fly by in a blur of laughter, warmth, and a quiet realization that only two deeply in love could share only one. As they sat together in the evening on their private balcony, the city was bathed in a golden glow from the setting sun. Mitchell received a small present that was delicately wrapped in silky paper, and for Mitchell couldn't help but be intrigued by her enigmatic smile at that point. This was the question he asked, his voice curious and his eyes excited. As her heart raced, Artha took a deep breath. She had been waiting for the right time to tell him, and now it felt like, when the time was right, he carefully removed the gift, revealing a small ultrasound in a frame. As he stared at the image of confusion, his eyes widened. Aura was unable to contain her joy any longer, as her sense of wonder grew. Mitchell softly whispered, "We're going," her voice thick with emotion. Mitchell remained frozen in place for a brief period of time while she gave birth. Words not quite sinking in, and then it seemed as though the realization struck him instantly. His normally placid eyes suddenly erupted into a grin that lit up the entire room, and composed were now overwhelmed with amazement and joy. He repeated the words, still resonating in his mind. "A baby, the best news I could have ever hoped for." His hands were shaking and his voice cracked with emotion, a little trembling as he reached out to gently embrace her, in that all the noise, chaos, and pressures of their lives seemed to stop for a brief moment. Once the two of them and the all other notable lives vanished, they were about to give birth to a tiny life, but this was the beginning of something new. Chapter 1, which neither of them had anticipated, but which they have now accepted open. Mitchell tightened his grip on her, as though his entire world had changed. He murmured, "In a moment, I promise you, Artha," his voice low and filled with conviction, "that I will be our child's best father. You and the baby are mine." She was overcome by the intensity of his love at this point, and Artha wept. She had a smile on her face, and her heart was bursting with love, whispered back with admiration and trust, "I believe in you, Mitchell." Their already deep connection had grown into something even more profound, and the future that had once seemed so. They were about to embark on a brand new journey, one that felt bright and full of promise after being initially uncertain, would bring them even closer together over time as they heard about the growing family quickly spread in the tabloids and social. The announcement caused a stir in the media, but this time Artha and Mitchell were unconcerned. They were too caught up in the happiness of their own little world to be bothered by the love they shared. People's perceptions were astonished by the way that once elusive Artha Franklin had discovered joy, and how the imposing and reserved Mitchell Snare was now a loving father figure. Husband is excited and tenderly anticipating becoming a father, but for Artha and Mitchell's love was more important than the outside noise. Their private moments became more treasured than ever as they worked together to build a new life. Before taking long walks together, having quiet dinners at home, and staying up late talks about what their future would entail. Everything was discussed in terms of how would instill in their children the values and aspirations they hoped to wanted to let you know that they both agreed that their child would grow up in a loving, supportive home where their child would always feel loved and safe. And Artha was amazed at the woman who had once questioned the possibility of love had discovered that everything in her life had come full circle. She had a husband and found herself surrounded by it in the most beautiful ways. Husband, a father, who adored him the sense of purpose that fatherhood gave him. The idea of becoming a father made him feel like he was complete in a certain way. He couldn't wait to hold his child in his arms to teach, guide, and love them, something he had no idea was possible. His promise to be the for them with the same passion and devotion he had for Aretha. He made a vow to be the best husband and father, not just a fleeting feeling. Intended to preserve every day of his life over the course of the months, Aretha's pregnancy progressed beautifully, and the excitement that came with her natural beauty was only enhanced by becoming a mother, and Mitchell couldn't help but find her even more radiant when they met. Together at doctor's appointments, choosing names and imagining what their child would be like that every day, so as did their excitement and love for each other, had resulted in the creation of something extraordinary, something they cherished more than anything else. They were prepared for the next phase of their lives, one that would be filled with the challenges and rewards of raising a family together. Their love had grown into something even more powerful than they could have imagined as they got ready for their child's arrival. They were aware that their journey had only just begun, and that it would be one that they would take together, heart to heart. As Artha and Mitchell looked ahead to the future, they were overwhelmed with love and gratitude for the life they had created, knew that they had everything they needed, each other's love, the promise of a beautiful family, and conviction that their relationship would only intensify over time. They were aware that they had found something permanent there. Even though the seasons and years passed, their lives also changed, But Mitchell and Artha's love only intensified, stronger, longer lasting, and more profound than what had begun as a passionate romance had developed into a partnership, which was far superior. Built on a solid foundation of respect, trust, and devotion, they had stood side by side through the trials of life, through every obstacle they encountered, demonstrating repeatedly that unwavering devotion was the mark of true love, not fleeting desire. The willingness to fight for one another, regardless of obstacles and mutual support. Their journey had not been easy, but they had overcome each challenge with courage and unity, strengthening their bond. They had established not only a life, but also a love legacy that was even more unbreakable. Had stood the test of time, been scrutinized by the outside world, and experienced the ups and downs of daily life. Their love became an ongoing illustration of the value of genuine connection. Something transcended the world's frequent superficiality. It was not about the extravagant meals, the expensive vacations, or the glamorous lifestyle they once led with the eyes of the world on them. It was about the quiet times, the ones they treasured the most. After a long day, Mitchell would pull her close and kiss her forehead, creating a peaceful atmosphere between them. Silence in the evening when they would sit together and reflect on their family's accomplishments, created their life, and how thankful they were to have met in a world that frequently appeared to. These were the moments that mattered, and throughout everything else, they had established a family and their children who had been raised in a loving environment. They were the epitome of everything Mitchell had intended for them to be, living evidence of the beautiful bond that had brought them together. And Artha had labored for the assurance of love, family, and unbreakable connection, brought a sense of fulfillment that neither of them could have imagined as they watched their children play and laugh into the air. Artha frequently found herself marveling at the manner in which them had ever been imagined possible. Everything had played out in such a way that her life was forever altered from the moment she met Mitchell. Amazing ways that she had been unsure about love for so long, not knowing if anyone would ever truly accept her for who she was outside of the attractiveness that had frequently been the focus of attention. But Mitchell had actually seen her as the person she was beneath everything, had a love for her that had grown stronger over time, and had a depth and intensity that took her breath away. It wasn't just about changing into something even more powerful and all-encompassing. Despite the fact that her beauty initially captivated him, it was her he had fallen in love with, her soul, her intelligence, and her kindness. Mitchell's arm was wrapped around theirs forever as they sat together and watched their children run and play in the yard. The fact that she had discovered something so unique made her Artha feel safe. Precious in the sense that it could never be taken away, she had settled in him as her home and their family through their shared love. And Mitchell was no different. There was nothing in the love he had for Artha. She had been his strength when he was weak and his calm when he was troubled. But when he needed it most, his joy. Their love had served as their life's foundation. It had given them the strength to face whatever came their way, through the highs and lows. Their way, and no matter what, they had always done it together. Children were the living evidence of their love, which was demonstrated by their laughter and smiles. Their goals, they had established a family and left a legacy for generations to come. When they left, Aretha realized that Mitchell was attracted to her beauty instead of the world's, was just one small part of what made her so amazing. Her love for dedication, unwavering strength, and support that had made her his most prized possession. And as they observed their knowing that she had succeeded, children's play, her heart swelled with pride and gratitude, found her forever in him. For Mitchell, the love they shared in the family they had built were the greatest gift. Additionally, their journey had been one of healing, growth, and learning how to deeply love others. As their children grew older and their love grew stronger over time, continued to flourish, Artha was aware that being surrounded by true happiness was the definition of true happiness. By the devotion of a partner who had loved her from the beginning, by the love of family, and by knowing that they had created something beautiful together and were forever in love, they would continue to construct a life that would change but remain constant. Love with the same dedication and commitment to one another that had brought them together forever. They had discovered eternal love in one another.